The zipper caught halfway up my back as I struggled to fasten the dress. My fingers, not as nimble as they once were, trembled against the worn fabric. In the mirror, I could see how the once vibrant blue had faded over the years, how the hem had frayed slightly at the edges, imperfections that made it all the more precious to me. "Mom, are you ready? We need to leave in 15 minutes. My daughter Rebecca's voice carried up the stairs, impatient and sharp. I took a deep breath, smoothing the dress over my hips. At 68, my body had changed since I'd last worn it. Softer now, rounder in places, but the dress still fit, just barely. When I descended the staircase, Rebecca was waiting in the foyer, scrolling through her phone. Her head snapped up at the sound of my footsteps, and her expression shifted from distraction to dismay. "Mom," she said, her voice dropping to that tone she used when she thought I was being difficult. "What are you wearing?" "My dress," I replied simply. "That old thing. We're going to the Hendersons' anniversary party. It's at the country club." Her eyes swept over me, cataloging every flaw. "Don't you have anything newer?" What Rebecca didn't understand, what I had never told her, was that this dress wasn't just fabric and thread. It was the last gift her father had ever given me, 20 years ago today. The last thing he'd ever see me wear before the accident that took him from us. Some treasures can't be measured by their appearance. Some memories are worn close to the skin, like armor against forgetting. "I'm wearing this dress," I said quietly, reaching for my handbag. Rebecca rolled her eyes, already turning toward the door. "Fine, but don't blame me when everyone wonders why you're dressed like it's still 2005. If only she knew what those words did to my heart. If only she could understand that sometimes the things we hold on to the longest are the very things keeping us from falling apart. Life had settled into comfortable routines before all of this began. After Robert's death 20 years ago, I'd learned to build a new kind of existence, one without my husband's laughter filling our home, without his warmth beside me at night. It hadn't been easy raising Rebecca alone from age 12, but we'd managed. More than managed. We'd rebuilt something good. My days had a peaceful rhythm. Mornings spent gardening in the small backyard of the house Robert and I had purchased when we were newlyweds. Afternoons volunteering at the community library or meeting with my knitting circle, 6 women who had supported each other through births, deaths, divorces, and everything in between. Evenings with a book or phone calls with my sister in Arizona. Rebecca had grown into a successful woman, precise, organized, ambitious. At 32, she was everything I'd hoped she would become professionally. A marketing executive for a prestigious firm with a beautiful home in the suburbs and a fiancé, James, who adored her. Yet sometimes I wondered if she had inherited too much of her father's drive without enough of his warmth. "You need to update your life, Mom," she would tell me during our weekly Sunday dinners at her house. "Your furniture is ancient, your clothes are outdated. You still have a landline, for heaven's sake." I would smile and nod, letting her words wash over me while holding firm to my choices. My furniture may have been ancient, but each piece held memories. The slightly sagging armchair where Robert used to read bedtime stories to Rebecca. The dining table with the small burn mark from the time our Thanksgiving candles tipped over. The faded curtains I had sewn myself when money was tight after his death. These weren't just things to me. They were anchors to a life I had loved. Rebecca meant well, I knew that. She wanted me to move forward as she had. After the initial grief of losing her father, she had thrown herself into achievement. Perfect grades, leadership positions, scholarships. As if accomplishment could fill the void his absence had left. Perhaps for her it did. "Mom needs help," I once overheard her telling James in her kitchen. "She's stuck in the past. It's not healthy." James, more perceptive than Rebecca sometimes gave him credit for, had replied gently, "Maybe the past is where she still feels close to your dad." Rebecca had dismissed this with a wave of her hand. "It's been 20 years. She needs to live in the present." 20 years. To Rebecca, it seemed an eternity. To me, sometimes it felt like yesterday that Robert had walked out our front door for the last time, kissing me goodbye, telling me how beautiful I looked in the new dress he'd given me for our anniversary. The dress had been a splurge for us then, more expensive than our budget usually allowed. "You deserve something special," he'd insisted, his eyes lighting up when I tried it on. The deep blue fabric complemented my eyes, and the cut flattered my figure. "You look exactly like the woman I fell in love with 20 years ago," he'd said. Hours later, a rainy road and a truck driver who fell asleep at the wheel took him from us. I received the news while still wearing that dress, the fabric absorbing my tears, as the police officer stood awkwardly in our living room. I never told Rebecca that part of the story. She knew her father had died in a car accident the day of our anniversary, but I spared her the details. How the dress had become both a treasured connection to him and a painful reminder of the last perfect moment we shared. Over the years, I'd worn it only on special occasions, moments when I needed to feel Robert's presence most strongly. Rebecca's high school and college graduations, the day she got engaged, and today, the Hendersons' 50th wedding anniversary celebration. Margaret and Bill Henderson had been our closest friends. They had helped me through the darkest days after Robert's death. They had watched Rebecca grow up, stepping in as surrogate grandparents after both Robert's and my parents had passed. Their 50 years together was a milestone Robert and I would never reach, but celebrating with them felt like honoring what we might have had, which is why, despite Rebecca's disapproval, I needed to wear this dress today. The week before the anniversary party, Rebecca had taken me shopping, an excursion she clearly intended as an intervention. We'd spent hours in department stores while she held up outfit after outfit. "This would look amazing on you, Mom," she'd insisted, presenting a pantsuit in a shade of coral I would never have chosen. "It's not really my style, dear," I'd replied. "That's the point," she'd said with a sigh. "Your style needs updating." I'd tried on several outfits to please her, complimenting her taste and thanking her for her thoughtfulness. But I'd known all along what I would be wearing to the Hendersons' party. Some decisions weren't about appearances. Now, as we drove to the country club in tense silence, I smoothed the fabric of the dress across my lap. It had been professionally cleaned and carefully preserved, but no amount of care could completely halt the passage of time. The blue had softened, the material thinned in places. Like me, it had aged, but remained essentially the same. "The Patel's daughter is going to be there," Rebecca said suddenly, breaking the silence. "She's a doctor now, just finished her residency. You remember Priya?" "Of course," I replied. "She and you were on the debate team together." Rebecca nodded. "She always asks about you when I see her. She said you were like a second mother to her in high school." I smiled at the memory. "She spent a lot of time at our house junior year when her parents were going through their divorce. Sweet girl." "She's hardly a girl anymore. She's 33 and a neurologist." Rebecca paused. "She posted pictures from a medical conference last month. She looked so polished and put together." I understood the unspoken comparison. In Rebecca's world, appearances mattered. Success had a specific look, and my faded blue dress didn't fit that image. "I'm looking forward to seeing her," I said simply. As we pulled into the country club parking lot, Rebecca checked her makeup in the rearview mirror, then turned to me with a softer expression than she'd worn all day. "I just want you to be happy, Mom," she said, "to have a full life." "I know, sweetheart." I reached over to pat her hand. "And I am happy, in my own way." What I didn't say was that happiness comes in many forms, And sometimes it lives in the things we choose to remember rather than the things we choose to change. The Hendersons' anniversary celebration was in full swing when we arrived. The country club ballroom had been transformed with twinkling lights and floral arrangements in silver and white. A string quartet played softly in the corner, and elegantly dressed guests mingled, champagne glasses in hand. Rebecca immediately spotted James across the room, handsome in his charcoal suit. He waved, making his way toward us through the crowd. I watched my daughter's face light up at the sight of her fiancé, and my heart warmed. Whatever our differences, I wanted nothing more than her happiness. "You both look beautiful," James said as he reached us, kissing Rebecca's cheek before giving me a warm hug. His eyes lingered on my dress for just a moment, but he simply smiled. "The Hendersons are over by the cake. They've been asking when you'd arrive, Eleanor." With James beside her, Rebecca seemed to relax, her earlier criticism of my appearance temporarily forgotten. We made our way through the crowd, stopping occasionally to greet old friends and neighbors. I noticed a few curious glances at my dress, but paid them little mind. The only opinion that would have mattered to me wasn't here to give it. Margaret Henderson embraced me tearfully when we reached the cake table. At 75, she remained vibrant and stylish, her silver hair elegantly coiffed, her navy dress obviously new and expensive. "Eleanor, you came," she said, holding me at arm's length to look at me. Her eyes fell on my dress, and something flickered in her expression, recognition, then a deeper emotion I couldn't quite name. "I wouldn't have missed this for the world," I replied, squeezing her hands. Bill Henderson, leaning slightly on a cane but still tall and imposing at 78, joined us. "Eleanor," he said warmly, kissing my cheek, "still the most beautiful woman in the room, after my Margaret, of course." Rebecca made a small, almost imperceptible sound beside me, something between a sigh and a scoff. I felt her discomfort radiating like heat. "Rebecca has been telling us about the wedding plans," Margaret said, turning to include my daughter in the conversation. "June at the Botanical Gardens sounds perfect." While they discussed wedding details, Bill's attention remained on me. "Walk with an old man to the punch bowl?" he asked, offering his arm. I took it gratefully, sensing he wanted to speak privately. As we made our slow way across the ballroom, he patted my hand resting on his arm. "You're wearing the dress," he said quietly. I nodded, not surprised he remembered. Bill and Margaret had been with me through everything after Robert's death. "It was today, wasn't it? Your anniversary and—" He trailed off. "Yes," I confirmed. 20 years ago today." Bill nodded slowly. "Robert would be proud of you, Eleanor, of the way you've carried on, of the wonderful job you did raising Rebecca." Tears pricked at my eyes, and I blinked them back. "Thank you, Bill." "Does she know? About the dress?" I shook my head. "I never told her the whole story. She was just 12. It seemed like too much. And now she thinks I'm stuck in the past, that I need to update my life." I attempted a smile. Maybe she's right. Bill made a dismissive noise. "The young think moving forward means leaving everything behind. They haven't learned yet that we carry the past with us no matter what." We reached the punch bowl, and Bill handed me a crystal cup of the pale pink liquid. "To remembering," he said, raising his own cup slightly. "And to 50 wonderful years," I added, genuinely happy for my dear friends, despite the ache in my own heart. When we returned to the group, Rebecca was deep in conversation with Priya Patel, both women laughing about some shared memory from high school. Priya looked up as we approached, her face breaking into a warm smile. "Mrs. Wilson," she exclaimed, embracing me. "I was hoping to see you tonight." "Dr. Patel now, I hear," I said proudly. Your parents must be thrilled. They are, she confirmed. Dad's here somewhere, probably bragging about me to anyone who'll listen. She glanced at my dress, then back at my face. You look lovely. That color has always been perfect on you. Before I could respond, another guest approached our little circle. Patricia Winters, a woman I'd never particularly warmed to. She'd moved to our neighborhood after Robert's death, and had always seemed to regard me with a mixture of pity and judgment as the widow. Eleanor, she said, air-kissing near my cheek. How nice to see you. Her gaze swept over my dress, her perfectly penciled eyebrows rising slightly. My goodness, is that the same dress you wore to the Martin wedding? That must have been, 15 years ago? The circle fell uncomfortably silent. I saw Rebecca stiffen beside me, her cheeks flushing with what looked like embarrassment. It's a classic, I said simply, refusing to be baited. Patricia laughed, a tinkling sound with no real warmth behind it. Well, they do say everything comes back in style eventually, though I'm not sure that particular cut ever will. Rebecca stepped forward slightly. Mom, I think I see the Johnsons. We should go say hello. Her voice was tight, her smile forced as she took my arm. As she steered me away, I heard Patricia say to Priya, just loud enough to be overheard, her daughter can't get her to update anything. Her clothes, her house, still living like her husband might walk in the door any minute. It's been 20 years? Rather sad, really. Rebecca's grip on my arm tightened painfully. I could feel the tension vibrating through her as we moved through the crowd. She didn't stop until we reached a quiet corner near the terrace doors. Why do you do this to yourself? She demanded in a harsh whisper. Why do you insist on living in the past? Rebecca, it's just a dress, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. It's not just the dress, Mom. It's everything. The house, the furniture, that ancient car you refuse to replace. It's like you're living in a museum dedicated to Dad, and I can't. She stopped abruptly, seeming to catch herself. You can't what? I asked quietly. Her eyes, so like her father's, filled with tears of frustration. I can't watch you stop living because he did. The words struck me like a physical blow. Is that what she thought? That I had stopped living? Before I could respond, James appeared at Rebecca's side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Everything okay here? He asked, looking between us with concern. Rebecca straightened, quickly composing herself. Fine, Mom and I were just catching up. The smooth social mask slid back into place, but I could see the hurt and frustration still simmering beneath. The Hendersons are about to cut the cake, James said. They asked if you'd both join them at the front. As we made our way back through the crowd, Rebecca leaned close to whisper in my ear, her voice tight with barely contained emotion. I just want more for you than this, Mom. You're only 68. You could have 20 more years. Are you going to spend them all clinging to the past? I had no answer for her then, but as we watched Bill and Margaret Henderson cut their anniversary cake, his hand steady over hers, their faces alight with 50 years of shared love and memories, I felt something shift inside me, a realization taking root that would change everything. The drive home from the anniversary party was silent, the tension between Rebecca and me stretching taut as a wire. I watched the familiar streets pass by through the passenger window, each house and storefront a marker of the life I'd built here, the only home Rebecca had ever known. You're staying at my place tonight, right? Rebecca finally asked as we neared my neighborhood. We had planned for me to spend the night at her house since it was closer to the bridal shop where we had an appointment the next morning. If that still works for you, I replied carefully. Of course. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. We'll just stop by your house so you can pack an overnight bag. 20 minutes later, Rebecca followed me into my bedroom, watching as I changed out of the blue dress and carefully hung it in my closet. I could feel her eyes on me as I folded a fresh outfit for tomorrow and gathered my toiletries. "I don't understand it," she said suddenly. "Your attachment to all of this." She gestured around the bedroom, which remained largely as it had been when Robert was alive. His bedside table still held his reading glasses and the dog-eared paperback he'd been halfway through. His robe still hung on the hook behind the door. I zipped my overnight bag before answering. "These things comfort me." "They trap you," Rebecca countered. "In grief. In the past. That's not how it feels to me." She moved to the dresser, picking up a framed photograph of Robert and me on our honeymoon, young and laughing on a beach in Florida, the farthest we could afford to go at the time. "I miss him too, you know," she said quietly, her finger tracing the outline of her father's face through the glass. "But I've built a life without him because I had to, because that's what he would have wanted." "We all grieve differently, Rebecca." "This isn't grieving, Mom. This is stagnation." She set the photograph down with deliberate care. Patricia Winters was right. The comment stung more than I wanted to admit. Patricia Winters doesn't know the first thing about me. She knows what everyone else sees, a woman who can't move forward. The injustice of her assessment flared like a match inside me. "I raised you alone. I maintained this house. I've traveled with my knitting group, volunteered at the library, made new friends. How is that not moving forward? You do all that while surrounded by Dad's things. You haven't redecorated, dated, or even considered moving somewhere more manageable. You're living exactly as you did 20 years ago, just without him." I shouldered my overnight bag, suddenly exhausted by the conversation. "We should go. It's getting late." Rebecca followed me down the stairs, clearly frustrated by my non-response. At the front door, I paused to set the security alarm, a new system James had insisted on installing last year. "See?" Rebecca said, gesturing to the keypad. "You fought us on that too. Any change seems to threaten you." "I'm using it, aren't I?" I replied, punching in the code. The drive to Rebecca's house passed in strained silence. Once there, she showed me to her guest room, modern, minimalist, and impeccably decorated like the rest of her home. No family photos, no mementos, nothing personal at all. "Towels are in the ensuite bathroom," she said, lingering in the doorway. "We should leave by 9 tomorrow for the bridal appointment. I'll be ready." She hesitated, then said, "I'm not trying to erase Dad, you know. I just want you to have a full life." "I know, sweetheart." After she left, I sat on the edge of the pristine guest bed, feeling strangely displaced. Rebecca's house, while beautiful, contained no evidence of her childhood, no traces of Robert, barely any indicators of her life before James. It was as if she'd been born fully formed at 25, her history neatly excised. I unpacked my nightgown and toiletries, then took a long shower in the luxurious bathroom. As I was preparing for bed, my phone rang, Margaret Henderson's name lighting up the screen. "Eleanor," she said warmly when I answered. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all. It was a beautiful celebration today." "Thank you for being there." She paused. "Bill mentioned you wore Robert's dress, the anniversary one." "Yes," I admitted. "It felt right somehow." "I recognized it immediately," Margaret said softly. "I was with him when he bought it, you know. He was so excited to give it to you." This was news to me. "You were." "He wanted a woman's opinion, said he knew nothing about dresses but wanted to get you something special. We spent hours shopping." She chuckled at the memory. "He was so particular. It had to be perfect." I clutched the phone tighter, hungry for this new piece of Robert, this detail I'd never known. "He never told me that. He wanted it to be entirely from him, made me promise not to mention I'd helped. she sighed. Eleanor, the real reason I'm calling. I overheard what Patricia said to you, and I saw how upset Rebecca seemed afterward. Rebecca thinks I'm stuck in the past, I said, the words catching slightly in my throat. And what do you think? I considered the question carefully. I think I've found comfort in continuity, in keeping Robert's memory alive. There's nothing wrong with that, Margaret said. But I've known you for over 40 years, Eleanor, long before you met Robert. You were always the adventurous one of our group, the one who wanted to travel, to try new things. Robert used to joke that he could barely keep up with you. The observation surprised me. Had I really changed so fundamentally? What I'm trying to say, Margaret continued, is that maybe both you and Rebecca are right, in your own ways. Perhaps there's room to honor Robert's memory while still embracing new experiences. After we said our goodbyes, I lay in the unfamiliar bed, Margaret's words echoing in my mind. Sleep eluded me as memories surfaced, not just of Robert, but of the woman I'd been before I met him, the college student who'd backpacked through Europe one summer, the young professional who'd taken sailing lessons and pottery classes, the bride who'd insisted on writing our own wedding vows when that was still considered unconventional. When had that woman disappeared? Morning came with no answers, just the weight of unresolved questions. Breakfast with Rebecca and James was polite but strained, our conversation limited to wedding details and the upcoming appointment. At the bridal shop, Rebecca tried on elegant modern gowns while I sat with the other mothers, offering appropriate compliments and suggestions. The boutique owner, a stylish woman in her 50s, circulated with champagne and advice. "And you're the mother of the bride?" she asked, pausing beside my chair. I nodded, accepting a flute of champagne. "We have some lovely mother of the bride dresses you might like to see while your daughter finishes up." Rebecca, emerging from a dressing room in a sleek, off-shoulder gown, overheard the comment. "That's a great idea," she said brightly. "Mom needs something special for the wedding." The boutique owner beckoned me toward a different section of the store. "What did you have in mind? Any particular color or style?" Before I could answer, Rebecca joined us, still in the wedding gown she was considering. "Something contemporary," she said. "Maybe in silver or champagne?" "I was thinking blue, actually," I said. Rebecca's expression faltered slightly. "Mom, blue isn't really traditional for mother of the bride." "Perhaps not, but it's my best color." I turned to the boutique owner. "Do you have anything in a deep blue?" She nodded, leading me to a rack of evening gowns. "These might suit what you're looking for." As I browsed the selections, Rebecca returned to try on more wedding dresses. I could feel her disappointment in my color choice. Another small rebellion against her vision of how things should be. The boutique owner pulled a gown in midnight blue from the rack. "This might be lovely with your coloring," she suggested. The dress was beautiful, understated yet elegant, with delicate beading across the bodice. Nothing like my old blue dress, yet somehow reminiscent of it in spirit. "I'd like to try it on," I decided. In the dressing room, I carefully removed my clothing and slipped the gown over my head. The fabric felt luxurious against my skin, the cut flattering my figure while accommodating the changes of age. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not just who I was now, but echoes of who I'd been before. The woman Robert had fallen in love with, the mother who'd raised Rebecca, and someone new I was just beginning to recognize. When I emerged from the dressing room, Rebecca was waiting, her expression unreadable as she took in my appearance. "What do you think?" I asked, suddenly nervous under her scrutiny. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, to my surprise, her eyes filled with tears. "You look beautiful, Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion. The simple compliment, so genuinely offered, broke something open between us. Without warning, I felt tears well up in my own eyes. "Oh, don't cry," the boutique owner said, mistaking our emotion for wedding sentimentality. "You'll both be gorgeous on the big day." Rebecca stepped closer, reaching out to touch the fabric of the new dress. "This is perfect for you, modern but classic." She hesitated, then added softly, "Dad would have loved it." It was the first time she'd mentioned her father without tension or judgment, and the gesture felt like an offering, a small bridge across the gulf that had widened between us. "I think he would have," I agreed, taking her hand in mine. That night, after returning to my own house, I stood in my bedroom looking at the closet where the old blue dress hung among my other clothes. For the first time in 20 years, I allowed myself to truly consider what Robert would want for me now. Not a shrine, not a life suspended in amber, but joy, growth, forward motion, the very qualities he'd loved most about me. With trembling hands, I reached for the box hidden on the top shelf of the closet, the one containing Robert's personal effects from the accident, the box I'd never shown Rebecca, never even opened myself after the police had delivered it. It was time to face the past, so I could truly step into the future. The cardboard box felt lighter than I expected as I carried it to the bed. For 20 years it had loomed large in my imagination, a Pandora's box of pain too acute to face. Now, sitting cross-legged on the quilt Robert's mother had made for our wedding, I slowly lifted the lid. Inside were the ordinary remnants of an interrupted life: Robert's wallet, keys, watch, the travel mug of coffee he'd taken with him that morning, his reading glasses in their case, and an envelope with my name written in his familiar handwriting. My heart stuttered. I hadn't known there was a letter. No one had mentioned it when they delivered his belongings. With unsteady fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded a single sheet of paper. "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I've been carrying this letter for months, adding to it occasionally, hoping you'll never need to see it. First, know that I love you more today than when we met 30 years ago. You and Rebecca are the great joys of my life, my proudest accomplishments, my deepest loves. Second, forgive me for the practical matters I've left for you to handle. I've done my best to organize our finances and insurance, but I know it won't be easy. Finally, and most importantly, live fully, Ellie. Don't let my absence diminish your presence in the world. You've always been the adventurous one, the one who pulls me into new experiences. Don't lose that spark. Remember when we first met at Margaret's birthday party? You were telling everyone about your plan to see all 50 states before turning 50. We made it to 37 together. Finish the list, Ellie. Take Rebecca to the places we never reached. Make new memories while honoring our old ones. I know you'll grieve. We've loved each other too well for it to be otherwise. But promise me you'll also laugh, dance, travel, learn new things. Promise me you'll continue becoming the extraordinary woman I've had the privilege to love. All my heart, Robert. The letter blurred as tears fell onto the paper. I carefully moved it aside, not wanting to damage this precious message, these words that had waited 20 years to reach me. Robert had known me better than I now knew myself. He'd anticipated not just my grief, but the risk of losing myself to it. And I had done exactly that. Preserved our life together like an insect in amber, beautiful but static. I had mistaken continuity for loyalty, stagnation for devotion. In trying to keep Robert's memory alive, I'd inadvertently betrayed a fundamental truth about the man I'd loved. He had always wanted me to grow, to experience, to embrace life fully. The realization washed over me like a wave, carrying away 2 decades of accumulated dust and stillness. Rebecca had seen it clearly, though she hadn't understood the root of my resistance. I hadn't been honoring Robert's memory by living in a museum to our past. I'd been hiding from the pain of building a future without him. With new clarity, I looked around the bedroom we'd shared. It wasn't just unchanged, it was frozen at the moment of greatest trauma. The mystery novel on his nightstand, bookmarks still in place, his slippers under the bed, even the water glass he'd left half full. This wasn't remembrance. This was a refusal to accept. And yet, the blue dress was different. It wasn't a relic of his death, but a celebration of his love. Wearing it wasn't clinging to the past, but carrying a piece of it forward, like a talisman. I carefully folded Robert's letter and placed it in my jewelry box, then began to sort through the contents of the cardboard box. Some items I would keep: his watch, which could be repaired and worn again; the glasses, which could be donated to someone in need; the wallet, which contained photos of Rebecca and me that deserved to be displayed, not hidden away. By midnight, the box was empty, its contents either integrated into my present life or set aside for new purposes. I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. The next morning, I called Margaret Henderson. "I found a letter," I told her, my voice still thick with emotion. "From Robert. He left it in the things he had with him that day." "Oh, Eleanor," she breathed. "What did it say?" I shared the essence of his message, his wish for me to live fully, to complete our travel plans, to continue growing. "That sounds exactly like Robert," Margaret said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "He'd have hated seeing you put your life on pause." "That's what I've done, isn't it? Rebecca's been right all along." "Not entirely," Margaret countered gently. "You haven't been frozen in time, Eleanor. You've raised a remarkable daughter, maintained friendships, contributed to the community, but perhaps you have been selective about which parts of life you've allowed to progress." The observation struck me as profoundly true. I'd compartmentalized, moving forward in some areas while keeping others perfectly preserved. "I don't know how to change after all this time," I admitted. "Perhaps start with the list," Margaret suggested. "The 50 states?" The idea took root immediately. "I've got 13 left to see." "Well, I'd say it's high time you got started." After hanging up, I pulled out the old atlas Robert and I had used to track our progress. Stars marked the states we'd visited together, from Maine to California, Michigan to Florida. The unmarked states created a rough pattern through the northern plains and mountain west, North and South Dakota, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming. A road trip, I thought suddenly. Not just to check states off a list, but to reconnect with the adventurous woman Robert had loved, the one I'd slowly buried under layers of grief and routine. With growing excitement, I began to research routes and destinations. By afternoon, I had a rough itinerary and a list of necessary preparations. The trip would take about 3 weeks, a timeline that seemed both daunting and thrilling after so many years of predictable days. There was only one missing piece. I wanted Rebecca to understand, not just what I was doing, but why. I called and invited her to dinner at my house the following evening, asking her to come alone. "There's something important I need to share with you," I told her. When she arrived, I had Robert's letter waiting on the coffee table alongside a bottle of his favorite Cabernet, a wine we'd discovered on our 10th anniversary trip to Napa Valley, one of the few bottles I'd kept from his collection. Rebecca's eyes widened when she saw the wine. "Is that—" "Your father's Cabernet," I confirmed, pouring 2 glasses. "I've been saving it for a special occasion." She accepted the glass cautiously. "What's the occasion?" "Understanding," I said simply, handing her the letter. "Please read this." I watched her face as she read her father's words, saw the moment her composure cracked, the tears she tried to blink away, the trembling of her hand against the paper. When she finished, she looked up at me with eyes so like Robert's it made my heart catch. When did you find this? Last night. It was in the box of your father's personal effects from the accident. I'd never opened it before. 20 years, she whispered. These words were waiting for 20 years. Yes. I took a sip of the wine, its complexity deepened by age. Your father knew me better than I now know myself. He understood the risk, that I might use grief as an excuse to stop living fully. Rebecca set the letter carefully on the coffee table. And the dress? The blue one from the party? It was the last gift he gave me, I explained. For our anniversary, the day he died. I was wearing it when the police came to tell me about the accident. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by dismay. Mom, I had no idea. Why didn't you ever tell me? You were 12. You'd just lost your father. I didn't want to burden you with the details of my grief. And later? I shrugged slightly. The longer I kept it to myself, the harder it became to share. The dress became my private connection to him, a way to feel close to him on important days. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. All these years I thought you were just stuck, refusing to move forward. I never considered there might be deeper meanings behind the things you kept. We were both partially right, I told her, reaching for her hand. The dress was a meaningful connection, but I did get stuck. I turned our home into a memorial when your father would have wanted it to remain a living space. I preserved everything as it was, instead of allowing natural change and growth. I gestured to the room around us, which already looked different. I'd spent the day rearranging furniture, putting away some of Robert's possessions while displaying others more intentionally. Photos once confined to albums now stood framed on tables. The room breathed more freely now, honoring the past without being imprisoned by it. I'm making changes, I continued, not erasing your father, but integrating his memory more thoughtfully into a life that continues to evolve. Rebecca squeezed my hand. I like what you've done in here. It feels lighter somehow. There's more, I said, reaching for the atlas I'd placed beside the letter. Your father reminded me of a goal we once had, to visit all 50 states. We made it to 37 together. I opened the map to show her the stars and the unmarked states. I'm going to finish the list, a road trip through the northern states we never reached. I hesitated, then added, I'd love for you to join me for part of it, if you can take time away from work. Rebecca stared at me, surprise giving way to a slow smile. A road trip? 3 weeks, camping some nights, small hotels others, national parks, quirky roadside attractions, local diners, the way your father and I used to travel. When? Next month. I know it's soon, but I gestured to the letter. I've already waited 20 years too long. Rebecca looked from the map to me, something shifting in her expression. For the first time in years, I saw not just the efficient, practical woman she'd become, but echoes of the curious, adventure-loving child she'd once been, Robert's daughter as much as mine. I can probably manage a week, she said finally. Maybe Wyoming and Montana. I've always wanted to see Yellowstone. Your father did too, I told her, emotion threatening to overwhelm me again. He used to talk about taking you there when you were older. Rebecca nodded, tears spilling onto her cheeks. Then we should definitely go. For Dad. For all of us, I corrected gently. For the past and the future. As we clinked glasses over Robert's letter and the map of our planned journey, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The realization that had begun at the Hendersons' anniversary party was now fully formed. Honoring Robert's memory didn't mean preserving everything exactly as it had been when he died. It meant carrying forward the love and spirit we'd shared, allowing it to inform a life still in progress. The blue dress would always have its place in my closet, and my heart. But now it would be joined by new experiences, new memories, new connections to the man I'd loved and the woman I continued to become. The weeks following my conversation with Rebecca passed in a flurry of preparation. Each day brought new tasks and decisions as I readied myself for the road trip and the broader changes I'd committed to making in my life. First came practical matters. My old sedan needed a thorough checkup before a cross-country journey. The mechanic recommended several repairs and updates, which I authorized without hesitation. "Planning a trip?" he asked casually as I signed the work order. "Yes," I replied, surprising myself with how easily the answer came. "A long one." Next, I purchased camping equipment, much of it lighter and more advanced than the gear Robert and I had used decades ago. A saleswoman at the outdoor store helped me select a compact tent, self-inflating sleeping pad, and portable stove. "Solo camping?" she asked as she demonstrated how to set up the tent. "For part of the trip," I confirmed. "My daughter will join me for a week, but the rest I'll do on my own." The woman, probably in her early 50s, gave me an approving smile. "Good for you. My husband and I started solo adventures after our kids left home. Best decision we ever made." Her easy encouragement bolstered my confidence. Each small step forward seemed to attract supportive connections, as if the universe were confirming I'd finally chosen the right path. At home, I continued the process of thoughtful transformation. I moved through each room with fresh eyes, asking myself what truly mattered and what was simply inertia. Some changes were small, rearranging bookshelves, updating throw pillows. Others were more significant. With Margaret's help, I sorted through Robert's clothing, setting aside special items to keep or repurpose while donating the rest to a veterans organization he'd supported. His favorite flannel shirt became a pillowcase. His collection of ties, preserved for decades, were destined to become a memory quilt, another project for after the trip. "How does this feel?" Margaret asked as we filled donation bags. "Bittersweet," I admitted. "But right, like I'm finally honoring who he really was, not just the absence he left behind." In the evenings, I researched destinations for the road trip, plotting routes through North and South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho. National parks and monuments filled my itinerary, along with quirky attractions Robert would have loved: the world's largest ball of twine, a corn palace, ghost towns preserved in the Mountain West. I created a dedicated travel journal, beginning with Robert's letter and our original list of states, then adding maps and reservations for the journey ahead. The planning itself felt like a form of healing, a bridge between the adventures we'd shared and those still awaiting me. Rebecca called frequently, her initial skepticism about my sudden changes giving way to enthusiastic participation. She requested vacation time from work and researched Yellowstone National Park with characteristic thoroughness. "There's a historic lodge where we should stay for at least 2 nights, she told me during one call. "And morning is the best time to see wildlife in Lamar Valley." I recognized in her detailed planning the same traits that had made her successful professionally, but now directed toward something joyful rather than critical. This project had shifted something in our relationship, allowing us to connect as adults with shared purpose, rather than as mother and daughter with conflicting perspectives. One Saturday, Rebecca arrived unannounced, her car filled with storage bins and organizational supplies. "I thought I could help you tackle the attic," she said. "If you want." The attic had become a repository for everything I couldn't face sorting, but couldn't bring myself to discard. Holiday decorations Robert and I had collected, Rebecca's childhood toys and school projects, old photo albums and slides, predating digital photography. "I'd appreciate that," I told her, touched by the offer. We spent the day sifting through dusty boxes, working as a team to categorize and decide. Some discoveries prompted tears, others laughter. We found Robert's old Super 8 camera and films we'd never developed. Rebecca's first pair of ice skates, love letters from my courtship with Robert that I'd forgotten I'd saved. "We should have these films digitized," Rebecca suggested, carefully placing the reels in a protective box. "And maybe some of these slides too." "I'd like that," I agreed. "To see them again after all this time." As we worked, conversation flowed more easily than it had in years. Rebecca shared memories of her father I'd never heard, how he'd secretly helped her with a science project when she'd procrastinated until the last minute, the advice he'd given her about standing up to bullies in middle school. "He always told me that courage wasn't about not being afraid," she recalled as we sat cross-legged on the attic floor, surrounded by partially sorted boxes. "It was about doing the right thing, even when you were terrified." "That sounds like your father," I said, smiling at this glimpse of their relationship. "He lived by that principle." Rebecca nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Do you think he'd be proud of me? Of who I've become?" The vulnerability in the question caught me by surprise. My accomplished, confident daughter rarely revealed such uncertainty. "Without question," I assured her. "You've built an impressive career, maintained strong ethics, created a beautiful life with James. The only thing that might concern him is whether you're allowing yourself to experience joy along the way." She looked down at her hands, considering this. "I've been so focused on success, on doing things right. Sometimes I forget about the joy part." "A family trait, it seems," I acknowledged. "Your father was actually better at that balance than either of us." We continued sorting, now with a shared commitment to rediscover not just physical mementos, but the spirit of joy and adventure Robert had embodied. By mid-afternoon, the attic had been transformed. Organized bins with clear labels replaced haphazard boxes. A donation pile waited by the stairs. A smaller collection of genuine treasures had been identified for preservation or display. "There's one more thing I'd like your help with," I told Rebecca as we prepared to leave the attic. "Something I've been considering." Downstairs, I led her to the spare bedroom that had functioned primarily as storage for years. I'd already begun clearing it, removing old exercise equipment and filing cabinets. "I'm thinking of turning this into a creative space," I explained, "for painting and perhaps pottery, things I loved before I met your father but never seemed to find time for after." Rebecca surveyed the room with fresh eyes. "The light in here is beautiful in the morning. It would be perfect for an art studio." We spent another hour measuring the space and discussing possibilities. An easel by the window, open shelving for supplies, perhaps a small electric kiln for ceramics. "We could paint the walls while I'm home for the road trip," Rebecca suggested. "Before we leave. What color are you thinking?" I considered the question carefully. "Yellow, I think. The shade of the sunflowers your father used to bring me." Rebecca nodded approvingly. "Yellow would be perfect." That evening, after Rebecca had gone home, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. The day's work had tired me physically, but energized me spiritually. For the first time in years, I felt fully present, not just going through motions, but actively engaging with life's possibilities. My phone chimed with a text from Rebecca. "Found these while reorganizing my office. Thought you might want them for the trip." Attached was a photo of travel guides for the national parks we planned to visit. I smiled, typing back, "Perfect. Bring them to dinner Sunday?" Her response came quickly. "Absolutely. James is excited to hear all about the trip plans." Setting down my phone, I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The evening air carried the scent of the rosemary plant Robert had given me for our garden years ago, still thriving after all this time. Like the blue dress, it was a living connection, not a relic, but a continuing presence. "You were right," I whispered, as if Robert might somehow hear. It was time to live fully again. The next day brought another important task, updating my will and financial documents. I made an appointment with my longtime attorney, explaining my plans for extended travel and the changes I wanted to make. "I've been thinking," I told him as he updated my paperwork, "about creating a small scholarship in Robert's name for engineering students at the community college." He smiled approvingly. "I think that's an excellent use of resources, a living legacy." "That's exactly what I want," I confirmed. "Not just preservation, but continuing impact." As the departure date for the road trip approached, I made one final, significant decision. After consulting with a real estate agent about the current market, I decided that upon my return, I would begin looking for a new home, something smaller, more manageable, but with space for my new creative pursuits, and a guest room for when Rebecca and James visited. I wouldn't sell immediately. The process of preparing the house would take time and care, but making the decision liberated something within me. This house had been a home filled with love, but the memories created here would travel with me wherever I went. The essence of what Robert and I had built together wasn't contained in walls and fixtures, but in the life we'd shared and the daughter we'd raised. The night before Rebecca was due to arrive for the first leg of our journey, I stood before my closet, contemplating what to pack. My fingers brushed against the blue dress, still hanging where it always had, still precious in its significance. I would not be taking it on this trip. Its place was here, safely preserved among my special memories. But I would take something else, the spirit of adventure it represented, the love that had gifted it to me, and the wisdom that had finally allowed me to understand its true meaning. My suitcase waited, open and ready, on the bed that had once been ours and was now mine. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter, not replacing the story Robert and I had written together, but continuing it in ways that honored both who we had been and who I was becoming. The plan was in place. The journey was about to begin. The morning of our departure dawned clear and bright, early summer sunshine streaming through my bedroom window. I'd been awake since dawn, too excited to sleep. After a quick breakfast and final check of my packing list, I waited on the porch for Rebecca to arrive. Her car pulled into the driveway precisely at 8, James behind the wheel. They'd decided he would drive us to our starting point in Minneapolis, where we'd pick up our rental SUV for the journey through the northern states. He would fly home, rejoining us in Bozeman, Montana 2 weeks later for the final leg through Yellowstone. "Ready for the great adventure?" Rebecca called as she bounded up the front walk, more carefree than I'd seen her in years. "More than ready," I replied, hugging her tightly. James loaded my suitcase and camping gear into their already packed car. "The house sitter knows everything," he confirmed, ever practical. "Margaret will check in daily," I assured him. "Mail is being held at the post office, and all the emergency numbers are posted on the refrigerator." With one last glance at the house, the only home Rebecca had ever known until college, the space Robert and I had filled with 30 years of memories, I locked the front door and joined my daughter and future son-in-law in the car. "It feels strange leaving," I admitted as we pulled away from the curb. "Like the end of an era." Rebecca reached back from the front passenger seat to squeeze my hand, or the beginning of a new one. The 6-hour drive to Minneapolis passed quickly, filled with conversation and planning. Rebecca had created a detailed itinerary for the portion of the trip we'd share, while I'd left my solo segments more flexible, with only key reservations fixed. "I thought we'd start with Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota," I explained, showing her the map I'd marked. "Your father always wanted to see the Badlands. And then Glacier National Park in Montana, Rebecca added eagerly. The Going to the Sun road is supposed to be incredible. James listened to our planning with an indulgent smile. You two are more alike than you realize, he observed during a stop for lunch. Rebecca and I exchanged surprised glances, then laughed in acknowledgement. The tension that had characterized our relationship for so long had gradually dissolved during the weeks of preparation, replaced by a shared sense of purpose and discovery. In Minneapolis, we collected the rental SUV, a practical vehicle with good clearance for national park roads and ample space for our gear. After a farewell dinner with James, during which he extracted promises of regular check-ins and safety precautions, Rebecca and I set off on our own. Just us now, I said as we crossed the Minnesota state line into North Dakota the next morning. First new state on the list. Rebecca grinned, reaching over to mark a star on the paper map we'd brought specifically for this purpose, a tradition from the trips she'd taken with Robert and me as a child. Remember how Dad used to insist we get a physical map for every state? She asked, carefully drawing the star. Even after GPS became common? He said maps tell stories that navigation apps can't, I recalled. All those little town names and geographic features. He was right, Rebecca said, tracing her finger along our planned route. Look at all these places we'd missed just following the blue line on a screen. The landscape opened before us, rolling prairies giving way to the otherworldly formations of the Badlands. We spent 2 days exploring Theodore Roosevelt National Park, hiking the petrified forest loop, and watching wild horses at sunset. At night, we camped under stars so brilliant they seemed close enough to touch. I'd forgotten how incredible this feels, Rebecca said our second night, as we sat beside a small campfire outside our tent, being away from city lights, seeing the Milky Way. Your father and I camped under these same stars the summer before you were born, I told her. We took one last big road trip before becoming parents. He named constellations for you, or what he thought might be you. We didn't know yet if you were a boy or girl. Rebecca looked up at the vast swirl of stars overhead. What names did he pick? Cassiopeia if you were a girl, the queen in her chair. Orion if you were a boy, the hunter with his bow. She smiled softly. I like that he chose a warrior queen. He said you were going to be strong and confident no matter what. He was right about that. From North Dakota, we traveled west into Montana, the landscape growing more dramatic with each passing mile. Mountains rose on the horizon, first as distant shadows, then as towering presences dominating the skyline. In Glacier National Park, we abandoned camping for a historic lodge with sweeping views of mountain peaks and pristine lakes. We drove the famous Going to the Sun road, hiked to hidden waterfalls, and spotted bears and mountain goats through binoculars. I wish Dad could see this, Rebecca said quietly as we stood at an overlook, the vastness of the park spread below us. I think he can, I replied, surprising myself with the certainty I felt, not literally, perhaps, but through us, through our experiencing it as he would have. The days developed a pleasant rhythm. Mornings began early with coffee and sunrise watching. Days were filled with exploration, some hikes challenging us physically, others allowing for contemplative enjoyment of the landscapes. Evenings brought relaxed meals and conversation that ranged from childhood memories to future plans. One night, as we shared a bottle of local wine on the balcony of our lodge room, Rebecca asked the question I'd been anticipating. The dress, the blue one Dad gave you, will you still wear it sometimes? I nodded, watching the last light fade from the mountains. On special occasions, but differently now, not as a relic, but as a treasured connection. I'm sorry I didn't understand before, she said softly. What it meant to you. How could you have? I never explained. I reached for her hand. We were both doing the best we could with grief neither of us knew how to navigate. "I think we're doing better now," she observed, and I had to agree. The trip continued through Wyoming, where the Grand Tetons rose like sentinels against the sky, and Yellowstone's geothermal features reminded us of Earth's ancient power. James flew in as planned, joining us for the final week and bringing fresh energy to our journey. Each day brought new discoveries, not just of landscapes, but of connections. Rebecca shared work challenges she'd never previously discussed. I spoke of dreams I'd set aside after Robert's death: painting, travel, perhaps even dating again someday. "Really?" Rebecca asked when I cautiously mentioned the possibility of companionship. "You'd consider dating?" "Not immediately," I clarified. "But eventually, yes. Your father wouldn't have wanted me to be alone forever." She considered this, then nodded slowly. "No, he wouldn't have. He'd want you to be happy." By the time we completed the circle back to Minneapolis, 3 weeks after our departure, I'd added 5 new stars to our map and countless new memories to my heart. The journey had accomplished everything Robert's letter had encouraged and more, not just checking states off a list, but reconnecting with the spirit of adventure and possibility that had once defined me. The drive home with Rebecca and James felt different from our outward journey. We were returning to the same physical location, but I was not the same person who had left. Something fundamental had shifted, not just in my perspective, but in my relationship with my daughter. As we pulled into my driveway, the house looked both familiar and slightly strange, as places often do after an absence. The garden had thrived under Margaret's care, roses blooming abundantly along the fence Robert had built decades ago. "Home sweet home," James said, unloading our bags. "Yes," I agreed, though the word held new meaning now. Home was no longer just this structure, but the expanded sense of self I'd reclaimed. That evening, after Rebecca and James had gone to their own house, I unpacked methodically, sorting laundry and organizing the souvenirs I'd collected. In the quiet of the bedroom, I opened my closet and found the blue dress hanging exactly where I'd left it. I ran my fingers over the familiar fabric, appreciating it anew, not as a symbol of loss, but as a testament to love that continues to shape a life in progress. The next morning, I began the first of the changes I'd planned before the trip. With paint samples spread across the spare room floor, I considered shades of yellow for my future art studio. The phone rang as I was comparing swatches. "How does it feel to be home?" Margaret asked when I answered. "Like I've returned to a familiar place as a different person," I told her honestly. "The best kind of journey, then," she said approvingly. After we hung up, I returned to my paint samples, selecting a soft golden yellow that captured the essence of sunlight. Tomorrow I would buy the paint. Next week, Rebecca would help me set up the easel and supplies we'd ordered before the trip. The execution of my plan was well underway, not just the road trip, but the broader journey toward a life that honored both past and future. Each step forward felt right, as if I were finally following a path I'd always been meant to walk. 6 months after our road trip, autumn painted the neighborhood in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. My life had transformed in ways both visible and invisible, each change building upon the last to create something new, yet rooted in what had come before. The most obvious change was the house itself. No longer a shrine to the past, it had become a living space that reflected both cherished memories and new beginnings. Robert's presence remained in meaningful ways. His favorite reading chair still occupied the corner of the living room, though now recovered in fresh fabric. His photographs still adorned the walls, though rearranged among new images from my recent travels. The spare bedroom had been completely transformed into the art studio I'd envisioned. Sunlight streamed through gauzy curtains onto an easel where a half-finished landscape took shape. my interpretation of a sunset we'd witnessed in Glacier National Park. Shelves lined one wall, holding pottery tools and clay waiting to be shaped during the classes I'd begun taking at the Community Arts Center. More subtle but equally significant were the changes in my daily rhythms. Mornings still began with coffee on the porch when weather permitted, but now included time for sketching or reading books on art techniques. Afternoons might find me volunteering at the library or meeting friends for lunch, not just my longtime knitting circle, but new acquaintances from my pottery class and a hiking group I'd joined. The road trip had sparked a renewed love of exploration. Though not every adventure required crossing state lines, I'd embraced smaller journeys, day trips to coastal towns I'd never visited, weekend excursions to nearby state parks, even a week-long tour of New England's fall foliage with Margaret and 2 other friends. Rebecca had noticed and approved of these changes. Our relationship had continued to evolve in the months since our shared journey, moving from the fragile reconnection of the trip itself to a more robust, adult friendship. She still offered suggestions and advice. It was in her nature to organize and improve, but with less judgment and more respect for my autonomy. "The studio looks amazing," she commented during a Sunday visit, admiring the painting in progress on my easel. "You've really found your style." "I'm still experimenting," I demurred, though secretly pleased by her appreciation. "The instructor says I have good instincts for color." She's right. Rebecca studied the canvas thoughtfully. "It reminds me of that evening in Glacier when we watched the sunset from the lodge balcony." "That's exactly what I was trying to capture," I confirmed, touched that she'd recognized the reference without being told. We moved to the kitchen, where I'd prepared a simple lunch to share. As we ate, Rebecca updated me on wedding plans, now just 2 months away, and work challenges. I shared news of my own projects, including the scholarship I'd established in Robert's name at the local community college. "The first recipient has been selected," I told her proudly. "A young woman studying civil engineering like your father. She's the first in her family to attend college." "He would have loved that," Rebecca said, her eyes brightening. "Will you meet her?" "Yes, at the award ceremony next month. I'd like you to come if you can." "I wouldn't miss it," she promised. After lunch, Rebecca helped me sort through more of Robert's belongings, a process we'd been undertaking gradually since the road trip. Today's focus was his collection of books, determining which to keep, donate, or pass on to specific people who might appreciate them. "Dad had eclectic taste," she observed, leafing through a worn copy of poetry by Pablo Neruda, engineering manuals alongside Hemingway and mythology. "He believed in balanced knowledge," I replied, setting aside his favorite mystery novels to keep. "Technical understanding and human insight." As we worked, Rebecca seemed preoccupied, glancing at me several times as if wanting to say something. Finally, as we packed the donation boxes, she spoke. "Mom, James and I have been talking about the wedding." "Is everything all right?" I asked, sensing her hesitation. "Yes, everything's fine." She took a deep breath. "We were wondering, would you consider wearing the blue dress? Dad's dress?" The request caught me completely by surprise. "To your wedding?" She nodded, suddenly looking younger and more vulnerable. "I know it's special to you, and now I understand why. It would mean a lot to have that connection to Dad there." Emotion welled up, unexpected and powerful. For years, I'd worn the dress privately, a personal talisman. Rebecca had only recently come to understand its significance, and now she wanted it to be part of her wedding day, a public acknowledgement of her father's continued presence in our lives. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It's quite old now, and certainly not a typical mother of the bride dress." "That's why it's perfect," she insisted. "It's authentic and meaningful. The blue dress we found at the bridal shop is beautiful, but this would be—" She paused, searching for the right word. Sacred, almost. I nodded, understanding completely. Then yes, I would be honored to wear it. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears as she hugged me tightly. Thank you. It will be like having a piece of Dad with us. That evening, after Rebecca had gone home, I carefully removed the blue dress from its protective covering in my closet. The fabric remained surprisingly vibrant despite its age, the cut classic enough to still look appropriate for a special occasion. I slipped it on, expecting the familiar effort of fastening the zipper that had always been a bit difficult. To my surprise, it closed more easily than I remembered. The weight I'd lost since beginning my more active lifestyle had subtly altered my body, allowing the dress to fit even better than before. Standing before the mirror, I saw not just my present self, but echoes of the past and glimmers of the future. The woman Robert had loved, the mother who'd raised Rebecca, the artist I was becoming, all present in this moment, connected by a length of blue fabric that had survived 20 years of grief, healing, and rediscovery. The following weekend brought another significant step in my evolving journey. After months of consideration and preparation, I had listed my house for sale, not out of urgency or financial necessity, but as a conscious choice to continue moving forward. The real estate agent had been surprised by my decision. "This is a family home with so much character," she'd observed during our initial consultation. "Are you sure you want to sell?" "I'm ready for something different," I'd explained. "A space that reflects who I am now, not just who I've been." Together we'd prepared the house for market, updating where necessary, staging to highlight its charm, but preserving the essence that made it special. The for sale sign had gone up yesterday, and already several showings were scheduled. Margaret came over to keep me company during the first open house, suggesting we escape to a local cafe while potential buyers toured my home. "How does it feel?" she asked, as we settled at a corner table with coffee and scones. "Seeing strangers consider buying your house?" "Surprisingly okay," I admitted. "Bittersweet, certainly, but right. The memories aren't in the walls and floors. They're coming with me." "Robert would be proud of you," Margaret said, echoing what had become a frequent refrain from those who had known us both this past year especially. "I think he would," I agreed, "though he'd probably tease me for taking so long to get here." Margaret laughed. "Without a doubt. He always said you were the brave one, but that sometimes you needed a nudge." "A 20-year nudge," I said ruefully. "Better late than never, I suppose." The house sold more quickly than expected. A young family with 2 small children drawn to the established neighborhood and spacious yard. "We can imagine raising our kids here for decades," the mother told me when they came for a final walkthrough. "It feels like a home where happy memories have been made." "They have," I assured her, "and will be again, I'm sure." With the sale pending and 2 months until closing, I began searching for my next home. Unlike the rushed downsizing Rebecca had once envisioned for me, this was a deliberate process of discovering what would best serve my current life and future plans. I found it unexpectedly one afternoon, a bright, modern townhouse in a mixed-age community near the downtown arts district. It offered the reduced maintenance I wanted without sacrificing character or forcing me to leave the city I loved. The main floor featured an open-plan living space with tall windows and a small but private garden. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms would accommodate both my own needs and visits from Rebecca and James or other guests. Most importantly, a bonus room with north-facing windows would make a perfect studio, larger than the one I'd created in my current house, with built-in storage and natural light throughout the day. When I brought Rebecca to see it, she circled the space thoughtfully, noting practical details while absorbing the overall feel. "It's so different from our house," she observed, "but it suits you somehow." "You think so?" I asked, valuing her opinion more than I once might have admitted. "It feels like you," she confirmed. "Not just who you were with Dad, but who you are now, who you're becoming." I placed an offer that afternoon, and within days had a signed contract. The timing aligned perfectly. I would move into my new home just after Rebecca's wedding, a synchronicity that felt meaningful rather than coincidental. As the wedding approached, final preparations accelerated. Rebecca asked if I would help her prepare something special, a memorial table with photographs of Robert and other family members who wouldn't be present for the celebration. Together, we selected images that captured his spirit: Robert laughing by a campfire during a family trip, teaching 5-year-old Rebecca to ride a bike, standing proudly beside her at her high school graduation. Among them, at Rebecca's insistence, was a photograph of Robert and me on our own wedding day, my hand resting on his chest as we gazed at each other. "You looked at each other like you were the only people in the world," Rebecca observed as we framed the photograph. "We often felt that way," I told her, "even after years of marriage. Your father had a gift for presence, for making whoever he was with feel completely seen and heard." "I remember that," Rebecca said softly. "How he would put down whatever he was doing when I came into a room, like my arrival was the best part of his day." "It usually was," I assured her. 2 days before the wedding, I carefully cleaned and pressed the blue dress, making minor repairs where needed. The seamstress who helped with final adjustments admired the quality of the fabric and construction. "They don't make them like this anymore," she commented, securing a loose seam. "This dress was meant to last." Like love, I thought, but didn't say. Like memory. Like family bonds that stretch and change, but needn't break. The morning of Rebecca's wedding dawned clear and crisp, a perfect October day with blue skies and golden light. I dressed carefully in my own home one last time, smoothing the blue fabric over my hips, fastening the familiar zipper. The woman in the mirror looked both timeless and thoroughly present, gray hair elegantly styled, minimal makeup enhancing rather than masking my age, the blue of the dress still complementing my eyes, just as Robert had observed 20 years ago. When I arrived at the botanical gardens where the ceremony would take place, Rebecca was in the bridal suite with her bridesmaids. She turned as I entered, resplendent in her wedding gown, a classic design with modern touches that perfectly captured her blend of traditional values and contemporary outlook. Her eyes widened when she saw me, then filled with tears. "Mom," she breathed, "you look beautiful." One of her friends, not understanding the significance of my dress, commented, "The blue is gorgeous with your coloring, Mrs. Wilson." "It was a gift from my husband," I explained simply, Rebecca's father. Understanding passed between the women in the room, the unspoken acknowledgement of love that transcends time and circumstance. As the ceremony approached, Rebecca asked for a moment alone with me. When the room had cleared, she took both my hands in hers. "I've been thinking about Dad all morning," she said, wishing he could walk me down the aisle. "He would have been so proud," I told her. "So happy for you and James." She nodded, blinking back tears that threatened her careful makeup. "I know, and in a way he is here, in your dress, in our memories, in the parts of him that live on in both of us." I hugged her carefully, mindful of her gown. "He is here," I agreed, "just as he's been with me through all the changes this year, not holding me back, but encouraging me forward." Rebecca smiled through her tears. "That's what real love does, isn't it? It frees us to become our best selves." "Yes," I said, recognizing the wisdom in my daughter's words. "That's exactly what it does." Minutes later, I took my place at the front of the garden where the ceremony would be held. As music began and guests turned to watch Rebecca process down the aisle, I felt a profound sense of rightness, of a circle completing without closing, of a story continuing into new chapters. The blue dress moved with me as I stood to receive my daughter, the fabric catching the autumn light just as it had caught summer sunshine 20 years ago when Robert first gave it to me. Not a relic, but a living connection, bridging past and future in this perfect present moment. 1 year after Rebecca's wedding, I stood in my new studio, morning light streaming through the windows as I applied final touches to a painting. The canvas captured a scene from memory, the road through Yellowstone National Park, where Rebecca, James, and I had watched a family of elk cross at sunrise during our trip. My townhouse had become a true home over the past year, each room reflecting the balanced life I'd created, honoring cherished memories while embracing new experiences. Photographs of Robert shared wall space with my own artwork and images from recent travels. His books occupied a special shelf in my living room, while new volumes on art and destinations yet to visit filled surrounding spaces. The blue dress hung in my bedroom closet, now among several special occasion outfits, rather than standing alone as a singular relic. I'd worn it twice since the wedding, to receive the award named for Robert at the community college's scholarship ceremony, and for my 70th birthday celebration. Each wearing felt like a conversation across time, a way of carrying Robert's love forward rather than merely preserving it. A knock at the door interrupted my painting. I set down my brush and went to answer, finding Rebecca on my doorstep with a small gift bag in hand. "Surprise visit," she said, hugging me as she entered. I was downtown for a meeting and thought I'd stop by. "Perfect timing," I told her. "I've just finished the Yellowstone painting. Come see." She followed me to the studio, studying the canvas with genuine appreciation. "You've really captured that golden morning light," she observed. "I can almost feel the mist rising off the meadow." "High praise from my toughest critic," I teased, knowing how her professional eye for detail extended to everything. Rebecca smiled, acknowledging the gentle joke. At 33, she'd softened somewhat over the past year, still driven and organized, but more balanced. Her marriage to James had proved a partnership of equals, and their recent news of a baby expected in spring had brought a new dimension to her perspective. "I brought you something," she said, offering the gift bag. Inside, I found a small leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover. "Open it," Rebecca encouraged. The first page contained a handwritten note in my daughter's precise script. "Mom, to record your next adventures." The empty pages represent all the possibilities still ahead. New places to see, new skills to master, new connections to make. Thank you for showing me that life is a continuing journey, not a fixed destination. I am so proud to be your daughter. Love, Rebecca. "It's beautiful," I said, deeply touched by both the gift and the sentiment behind it. "There's something else," she prompted, gesturing for me to look further into the bag. Beneath the journal lay a small velvet box. Opening it, I found a pair of sapphire earrings, the deep blue matching the color of the dress that had come to symbolize so much. "James and I picked these out together," Rebecca explained. "We thought they'd complement the dress perfectly for special occasions." I fastened the earrings immediately, moving to the studio mirror to admire their subtle sparkle. "They're perfect," I told her, turning to embrace her again. "Thank you." We settled in my living room with tea, catching up on each other's lives. Rebecca shared details of nursery preparations and name considerations for the baby. I updated her on my latest art projects and plans for a painting retreat in the mountains next month. "You seem happy, Mom," she observed during a lull in conversation. "Really happy," not just getting by. I am, I confirmed. It surprised me at first how much joy was still possible, how much life was waiting once I made space for it. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately, with the baby coming, about what kind of grandfather he would have been. Absolutely besotted, I said without hesitation. Probably worse than with you, if that's possible. He'd be building cradles and toy chests already. She smiled at the image. I want the baby to know him somehow, not just facts about him, but his spirit, his approach to life. We'll make sure of that, I promised. Through stories and photographs, yes, but also by living the values he cherished: curiosity, kindness, finding wonder in everyday moments. After Rebecca left for her afternoon appointments, I returned to the studio, adding the final brushstrokes to the Yellowstone painting. Once completed, it would join a growing collection, some displayed in my own home, others given as gifts, and a few sold through a local gallery that had unexpectedly offered to represent my work. Painting had reconnected me not just with a forgotten passion, but with a part of myself I'd set aside long before Robert's death. The young woman who had dreamed of creating beauty, of capturing moments that might otherwise be lost to time. In rediscovering this aspect of my identity, I'd found a way to honor both Robert's memory and his final wish for me, to live fully, to continue becoming. That evening, I joined my hiking group for dinner at a local restaurant, a monthly tradition combining exercise, friendship, and good food. Among the members was David, a retired architect whose wife had died 3 years ago. Our shared experience of loss had formed the foundation of a growing friendship that had recently begun to hint at something more. The painting is finished, I told him when he asked about my current projects. I'd like you to see it. I'd love to, he replied warmly. Perhaps after our hike this weekend? I nodded, comfortable with the unhurried pace of this new connection. Neither of us approached it with the urgent intensity of youth, but with the measured appreciation that comes from understanding life's fragility and preciousness. Later, alone in my townhouse, I prepared for bed with the contented fatigue of a day well spent. As had become my habit, I paused at the small altar of remembrance I'd created on my dresser, a photograph of Robert, a river stone from our favorite camping spot, the watch he'd worn daily that I'd finally had repaired. It was a good day, I told his image softly. Rebecca brought me a journal for new adventures and earrings to match your dress. The Yellowstone painting is finished, and life continues to unfold in ways I never expected. The ritual wasn't born of inability to let go, but from the understanding that love transforms rather than disappears. That grief, when finally embraced rather than resisted, could evolve into a different kind of connection, one that supported growth rather than demanding stasis. As I closed my eyes that night, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years, from the moment Rebecca had criticized my choice to wear the blue dress to the Henderson anniversary, through the discovery of Robert's letter, the revelatory road trip, the wedding, and all the changes that had followed. The dress itself remained special, a tangible connection to Robert and the love we'd shared. But its meaning had expanded, layer upon layer of significance added through new experiences. It was no longer primarily a reminder of loss, but a symbol of continuity, of love that endures while allowing for change and growth. What I understood now, in the quiet wisdom of 70 years, was that honoring those we've lost doesn't require freezing ourselves at the moment of their departure. True fidelity to love means carrying forward the best of what was shared while remaining open to life's continuing possibilities. Rebecca had been right about the need for change, though perhaps not in the way she'd initially imagined. And I had been right about the importance of meaningful connection to the past, though not through preservation alone. The blue dress would always remain among my most treasured possessions, a gift from a man who had loved me enough to wish for my continued becoming even in his absence. It would be worn for special occasions still to come, the birth of Rebecca and James's child, milestone celebrations, moments when I wished to feel Robert's presence most tangibly. But the greatest tribute to his memory wasn't in the wearing of a dress or the preservation of objects. It was in the choice to live with the same openness to joy, growth, and possibility that had characterized our life together. A choice I renewed each morning as I stepped into whatever the day might bring. In the end, the most profound lesson I'd learned was this: some treasures are meant to be preserved, but the greatest honor we can offer those we've loved and lost is to live fully in their absence, carrying their love forward, not as a burden that anchors us to the past, but as a foundation that supports our continued journey. The blue dress had never been just fabric and thread. It was a testament to love that transcends time and circumstance, not by remaining unchanged, but by inspiring continued growth and embracing of life's precious impermanence. And in that understanding, I found not just closure, but opening to all that had been, all that was, and all that might yet be.